we continue talking about another philosopher who is Plato. Let's see what they say about him. Now, he's known, Plato is very famous as a Greek philosopher who talked about the idea of the cave. Maybe you heard about it. And he was talking about forms and ideals, and the ideals as reflecting the word idea. Okay, let's see what he said. Now he tried to conceptualize the idea of ideal society, and he wrote what is called the Republic, جمهورية أفلاطون, very famous book that he wrote. Now that was the way that was written in Greek literature and Greek philosophy. Kind of, this is how they used to gather in their debates. And they think that Plato is one of the most people who inspired philosophers in even till nowadays in Western philosophy and contemporary philosophy. Now, let's see what is known about Plato. Now, Plato, this is, that's the sculpture of Plato, who is, given by one of the Roman people who used to, illustrate academia in Athens. Now, this is how it was written, Plato in Greek. Okay, and which is it is in a way in Greek it's pronounced very different. Maybe you can ask somebody in Greece to say it, but it's in classical ethic. It's Athenian of a philosopher who used to study his period, the classical period, and the ancient Greece in a very Platonic way. Platonia. Even now we say we refer to him as Platonic. So Platonism is the philosophy of Plato and philosophical systems, that is derived. When you say Platonic, you derive it from the word Plato, and Platonism derived from Plato. Thinking about it in contemporary philosophy and contemporary literature as accepting all doctrines of Plato. And, that was taken in Western thought to discuss major things, such as, for example, the existence of abstract objects. So he was thinking of abstract objects as forms and namadaj, okay, or ideas, muthal, they call it muthal ulia, which is al-mithal, okay. So everything you can see here that is materialized, and you can see it as an object, originally in the mind, you can think of it as an ideal, okay. And that was, taken through his, as a study in his academy. And that was learned later on in Western world through his, very, very important figure in history. And of course, his teacher, Socrates. So he was the student of Socrates, let's say, or the scholar of Socrates, who was, the founder. But he was a student that, considered all ideas of Aristotle, we'll talk a lot about later, that were totally, he was totally against him in a way. Now, Aristotle, when we talk about Aristotle, we talk about also religion and spirituality. While when we talk about Plato, we talk about his, maybe in a way different, like materialistic way of thinking. So he was realistic, واقعي, while Aristotle was mithali. So he rejected the ideas of his teacher. And his philosophy was called Neoplatonism, which is a new way of thinking of Plato's ideas. And then different philosophers discussed his ideas, of course, but he concentrated on a very important doctrine in his philosophy, which is called dialogue, and the dialectic forms. Now, what is the dialogue? Dialogue, it's written or spoken conversation. At that time they used to speak and to discuss and have debates, oral debates, more than written. Later on it was written, and we have it through his Republic, for example. So it is a spoken conversational exchange between two or more people. It was a gathering of thinkers, or his school, let's say, an academy. And it was like a theater. So it was a theatrical form that they were exposed together to exchange their ideas. And they tried to, in a way, have what is called Socratic Dialogues, الحوارات السقراطية, referring to another founder, which is Socrates, that we discussed before, if you remember. Now, what about, of course, now Plato developed such Socrates dialogues, and he went through what is called dialectic or dialectics, as what is known as a method. It is known as a method, المنهج الديالكتيكي, they call it in Arabic, which is the real base of any discourse, okay, which is based on holding different points of views and discussing it, maybe accepting or not accepting, raising questions and having opposed opinions and so on, till they reach what they claim as the truth, till they use lots of reasoning, lots of let's say logical thinking and analysis to reach the basic idea through argumentation. So it's like dialects here. It's like a debate, but based on knowledge, on analytical thinking more than any other. He also considered many different ideas in political philosophy. And for example, he discussed major ideals, okay, like or what he called forms such as liberty, justice, rights, for example, property rights, and later on realizing human rights, and of course law and order and authority and all such ideas that were related later on to what is called the government legitimation or legitimacy and rights and freedoms. Okay, so that was political philosophy in terms of Plato. He also discussed or introduced a very important theory, which is called theory of forms, نظرية المثل أو النماذج. Now, theory of forms, or what is called, sometimes it is called theory of ideas. It is philosophical theory, and it is mainly, as you can see, ideas or concepts. And that was attributed to Plato as a founder. And he used to think that the physical world is not a real one. So what we think is real is not real, okay? The way we recognize the world as we think this is it, as real, it is not true. So he thought of it as not real, not true. He thought of it as timeless. He thought that truth should be timeless, and absolute. الحقيقة المطلقة. So what we are having here in the world in reality is not same as what is absolute. So he differentiated between two things, the reality and the form. Okay, so it's the form, it's like an image, or sorry, the reality, it's like an image of the form, but it's not the actual one. We think it is. Okay, and he referred to that idea of the cave. Okay, and his theory of the cave. So this is why he thought of what is called unchangeable ideas, and that to him in that theory, he thought that ideas is the sense. So if you the sense or the essence of the word is ideas. Okay, it is the essence is the form. Okay, or the forms, not the reality that we perceive. And he tried to translate ideas and forms as when he translated it into his theory, and it was known as he said you cannot know that unless you use pure reason, al-aql al-mahd in Arabic, pure reason, which is kind of speculation, you know, speculation or speculative reason. And sometimes they used to call it theoretical reason, al-aql al-nazari. Okay, as if you are he tried to differentiate between theoretical reason and application of the reasoning. العقل العملي والعقل النظري. العقل النظري, which is theoretical reason, it is speculation, and through that speculation and what he called as pure reason, which is theoretical thought, okay, and not practical thought, as I said. Through that, you can reach the truth or the absolute truth, which is basically a form or forms and ideas. Okay. Now he presented a solution to what he thought to be as a problem of the universe or problem of universals, which is, according to ancient questions, was concentrated on metaphysics. And he thought that many disputes through his theory, the way he thought of, what may be considered as absolute truth, as opposed to the main problems that we may face in the universe. Okay. Now, that is this way of thinking was called later on Platonic Realism. Okay, al-waqi'iyya al-aflatuniyya in Arabic they call it, Platonic Realism, which is opposed to idealism according to Aristotle, that we'll see later on. Now, what is Platonic Realism? It's kind of philosophy, a branch, or it is a position that they think that the universals, he called them universals or abstract objects. Okay, abstract objects, المواضيع الابstract المجردة. Okay, they exist objectively and outside of human minds. So you can think of, for example, if you want to talk about happiness, for example, let's talk about happiness. To him, it is there, it exists, happiness exists objectively as an object outside human mind. So whether for example, whether your mind understands it or realizes it or not, it is there. So if man doesn't understand or realize, for example, happiness, that doesn't mean happiness is not there. See, so that's what he called as the objective realization. This is why it's realism, the objective realization of things or ideas or forms, that they are there although we cannot perceive them. Okay, so it is named after the Greek philosopher Plato, who applied realism in all ideas that he called as universals. Okay, and he considered them as ideal forms, and that way that are there, although they may not exist physically. Okay, this is his main idea. Now, sometimes you call it Platonic Realism. Some people call it Platonic Idealism, which is the same. It's Plato's theory here of forms or doctrine of ideas, and you can see that that they concentrate on what is not physical. Okay, so the way that physical form cannot be in the mind, so you think of it and you realize it as a form, as an idea or ideal. المثالية الأفلاطونية. Okay, so you either talk about الواقعية الأفلاطونية or المثالية الأفلاطونية. Okay, and to him they are the same. For example, and this made him think about what is called, for example, Platonic love, الحب الأفلاطوني, which is to him as an example only here. He discussed it, example of a type of love that is not sexual, and he was talking about it as, it is named after a Greek philosopher, which is Plato. Now, he did not think of it concerning the lovers. He was talking about the idea itself. So this is why when you talk about the idea itself, so it's not sexual, it's pure love, pure, talking about the ideals themselves rather than the materialization and actualization of the idea itself. Okay, and the same way he was thinking of other attributes, like, for example, wisdom, like beauty, like happiness, and so on. So we have wisdom whether we have wise people or not. We have beauty whether we have beautiful people or not, and so on. So, and he considered that when we say this man or this woman is beautiful, he always consider it as relative to the form or the ideal form of things as considered to be as beauty. So it's not beauty is absolute, while beautiful people are not absolute. Okay, and that they are in a less, let's say, way, not the way, for example, the absolute beauty is treated as a form or as an ideal. Okay, and this is the way he also thought of Platonic solids. Now, for example, all such ideas were presented also in through his discussion. For example, he discussed education and how people should be educated. He discussed also, so he's all people studying education will go back to his ideas, Plato, and also how life is and how death is considered to be after life. He also discussed this because he was always fascinated with the idea of the absolute God or the absolute love, the absolute form, and so on. He also, when he was discussing mind and logic, he made him discuss many problems in mathematics and in logic. He also discussed metaphysics. When he discussed metaphysics, he talks about two things: the forms and the soul. Okay, the forms, as we said, reflecting the abstract of objects. So any object that you can see, for example, if you have a table, that's the object. Now the abstract of the object is the form that does not exist in life here in our world, but it is there as an ideal form in his mind, in his pure reason, as we said before. Now, also the soul, when he discussed the idea of the soul, again, he was thinking of epistemology and the different dialogues talking about what is known by man and what is accepted and what is not known. So even knowing and recognizing things, that is a very, very important idea that he discussed. That's Plato's epistemology and the way he discussed it through his knowledge and point of view. Also, you can see, he discussed also many ethical things, ethical terms, for example, like justice, like politics and authorities, and many themes also. And there was also the idea of the cave. I want just to talk about the idea of the cave. It's very important because it reflects all his way of thinking. Now, this is how the allegory of the cave that was illustrated here in a painting later on. That theory of forms, نظرية النماذج or المثل, it has more than one way of saying it. It is capturing, the allegory of the cave and saying that explicitly it's like an analogy of the sun. Okay, he was thinking of it as that the sun rays dividing the line. Now, what is the analogy of the sun? Let's see. Now, it is found in the 6th book of the Republic here, because it's many parts. The Republic is which is his book, main work of Plato. He discussed that analogy in the 6th book, in the 6th part, and he was referring to it through a dialogue between two characters. I don't know if you read that Republic, which is between Glaucon and Socrates, which is his Socrates, the founder, of philosophy in Greek literature and philosophy. And it was about the whole dialogue was about what is the definition of goodness, okay, and how can we define goodness. And of course, lots of talk and discussions and debates and dialectic debate was there using that analogy. And let's continue this analogy and see what was it. Of course, this is Platonism, and he talked about the reflection that Socrates, he reveals that the child of goodness is to be the sun, okay, which is without the sun, the light of the sun that illuminates, okay, you cannot see the reality, because the sun gives you the ability to see, okay. So if you don't have the sun, you cannot see. So the idea of goodness to him, it is the beginning, or it illumines the intelligible with truth. It gives you the truth in a way, and that was his epistemological, what we call ontological theory through what is called the theory of cave. Now, what you can see if you are within the cave without that sun is only what you think is true. Actually, it is not, because suppose that you were born in a cave and you were never accepted to go out of that cave. Okay, that was his analogy or allegory. Now, if you are not accepted to go out of that cave, what do you think? If you are born there and nobody let you go out, you will think that this is the world, this is the actual world, and you cannot imagine what is beyond, or beyond that cave. And he said this is exactly how man is born. You are in this universe, you think that this is it, and this is the everything in the world, and this is the truth, while in reality you cannot see what is beyond. It's like the idea of the cave. So you think it is, but it's not. You are deceived. Now, this what made him think that there is another thing, another ideal thing, or another form, or another absolute form of perfection and justice and goodness that exists, that man does not realize, okay, because of his, limited thinking ways. So, and he wrote this all in his, dialects with Socrates in the Republic, and lots of ideas were, reflecting his dialectic way of thinking. He also thought about family as you know, family was discussed by Plato as one of the major questions about the fate of man and his midwife and orphans, and he discussed the idea of love and all things. For example, he agreed with Aristotle that women unfortunately were inferior to men, and this is very sarcastic actually. It's what how people criticize nowadays Plato. Plato was a great man, but it's astonishing that at that time he thought of, together with Aristotle, of women as inferior to men. And some say that he also thought of women as similar to, in a way, to animals. So they don't have the will to do anything. So they were inferior, and that was not accepted nowadays, of course, because the logic he used to think is so bizarre. And that was the way at that time things were going through his dialogues that were traditionally later on translated in many languages. You can, of course, if you are a feminist, you will not accept this idea. Also, he talked about history. He talked about the nation and how it should be built. He talked about arts, very important discussion also in arts. He talked about, for example, also the form, and he had what is called the Mosaic Academy, that they used to think of very important illustration of ideas through art, and emotions through art. And they used to think of art as having the effect of what they call it the catharsis, تطهير. Okay, the catharsis role of art, المهمة التطهيرية, which is the catharsis of the soul. Okay, the soul and mind, and mainly the soul rather than the mind. Very, very important ideas, actually. So I will leave this to you to be studied later. Let me now make a quick stop it and see if you have any question.